Hi everyone, welcome back to my home studio. This is my day 37 on my coronavirus distraction videos that I've been doing. I got a little bit behind in the past couple of days. I've had a lot going on with school recently, and yeah, so anyway, today's day is going to be on making a yarn bowl. I had someone, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, someone who said, hey, can you show us how to do yarn bowl? So a yarn bowl is a bowl for someone who like knits or crochets. They might use a ball of yarn where they would take a skein of yarn, they would roll it up, and then they could put their ball in here, and then they could pass the yarn out through the hole, the spiral, or if they didn't want it to be interchanged, like they don't want to change it up, they could use the little single hole here. Knitting needles could be stuck through those as well. So I have previously shown how to throw a bowl, but I'm going to review it really quickly and trimming that, and then how I cut the spiral. Yarn bowls used to be among my largest sellers that I ever had, and I haven't focused as much on them now, but I still have some. Like you'll see some up above, probably up there. I've got yarn bowls, so they're still kind of a popular thing for people that are knitting and crocheting and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoy. I have another video that I'm making as well on my kiln. See, my hood's down. I fired my bisque kiln, and I have a video that I'm making on that. So that will be day 38, so hopefully tomorrow. So stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can. I begin by attaching the ball to the bat and kind of pounding it into the mountain shape and then sealing it. Then I move to the coning part, remembering that you have to concentrate on centering the base of that cone in order to get the rest of the piece centered. If you're not centering the base first, you can't get the rest of it centered. Now once you get into the hockey puck, then I'm dropping the middle, keeping it about a half an inch thick. The key here is when I go to pull it open, I'm pulling it but lifting my fingers to create an arch, or it's going to be rounded on the interior. I don't want a flat bottom with a corner. Now I continue to pull the wall just like a regular cylinder, but again, keeping the rounded nature of the base there. Now as you're pulling and thinning, a nice stable pull, and you want to make sure that you're stabilizing the top edge at the end of a pull. That helps, especially as a beginner. And then lastly, I'm just going to do a little refinement there with my last couple of pulls to get the contour that I want. Making sure that the edge is nice and even. Trim away any excess that you might have there on your bat. And if you are using a bat, you can cut it and leave it on the bat. Now I'm going to be trimming on my Giffen grip. Remember that it's round on the inside. I'm going to mark the indication of where I want the outside of the foot, and that's the transition where it goes from side into bottom. Now I'm going to start off by doing the exterior of the foot by going straight down where I marked it. So when I go straight down from the bottom, that gives me a nice even cut from the bottom. Okay, and then I'm going to take off the excess clay, and I'm defining a foot there because I like my bowls to have defined feet, and I often make it in a way that I can actually hold it by the foot when I'm glazing. I'm compressing now, so if I had any grog, I'm getting it compressed in there. And so that's the angle on my foot I'm talking about. And now I'm doing the interior cut, and I go straight down from the bottom, and it will be parallel with the outside cut. As long as they're both straight down from the bottom, your foot will be parallel and even. There are many different ways that you can cut the notches for a yarn bowl. This is the way that I cut mine, but I encourage you to try to find, your own style, your own system that you like. The one thing that you have to be aware of is when you go to cut, if you are cutting a spiral or something that hangs down, you don't want to have too thin of an area of support, and you always, always, always want to make sure that your edges are super duper smooth, because if you're putting yarn in there, you don't want the yarn to inadvertently snag on something that is a little bit rough. I prefer to lay out my lines by drawing it with my needle tool before I end up by cutting with my knife. just so I know where I'm cutting. Okay, I lay it out first and I just kind of draw it lightly, and again making sure that it's not too thin, and I do have the gap that I'm going to be cutting. It tapers from thick to thin, so I wouldn't want it to get thicker out in here. Now as I cut, I'm using something sharp like an X-Acto, and you want to be aware of cutting in a manner where you're not stressing the wall too much and causing a spot to be weak. So there, you can find whatever way works best for you. I am cutting this at the leather hard state, I should say. So there's the end of the hole. Now I'm going to back this around. Now I'm kind of holding the clay in place because I want to be supportive to this. Now here's the trick. As I come back around to this corner, I don't cut off because I have a greater tendency to chip. I cut in from the edge and I make those lines meet up. Now I can trim that out. Okay. Next, I'm going to cut the holes that I typically do. These two holes are side-by-side holes, so if people want to put their knitting needles kind of stuck through the yarn and into the holes, it kind of locks the yarn in place. Again, I don't want to get too close. And then lastly, I'm going to put a single hole down here because I like to do a single hole. So if someone wanted to have their yarn ball, just have the yarn flow through a hole rather than the spiral, like if they weren't planning on changing it. Okay, the edges are sharp at this point, so to kind of round the edges, I'm going to use one of these. You've seen me use these a lot. The Kemper mini ribbon tool that is kind of like a triangle. So I'm going to take this and I can kind of shave off the edge when I go to do the interior of this spiral again. I'll kind of hold it in place so I'm not stressing it. I have snapped the spirals when cutting them before, and that's a big disappointment. I mean, you can reattach it, but it's never quite as secure. Now, I also have to round it on the interior. This is truly a detail you don't want to skimp on. If you have a rough edge and someone has your pot to use with yarn, they are not going to be happy if their yarn is snagging on it. The last little bit of cleanup is going to be to clean off these cut edges. Now, if you have clay that does not have grog, you can certainly use a small sponge very carefully in there. If you have clay that has grog, I would not recommend the sponge because grog will leave behind a gritty surface if you sponge it. Whenever you sponge clay with grog, the sponge will remove the smallest particles of clay and leave behind the big particles, which would be the grog, and that's kind of a pain to clean up. So a wet, stiff paintbrush is my go-to for cleaning grogged clay. All right, I'm giving it a once over just to make sure it looks like it has a super smooth surface. Nothing that's going to be a small little area that might catch and make yarn snag. That looks pretty good. Okay. I usually like to stamp mine visible in the front. So when I photograph it, it's showing my stamp. Now, the key with drying something like this is to allow it to dry slowly and evenly. All right, in order to dry something like this, I would be placing it upside down, make sure that this is aligned. You don't want that to be sticking out at all. And then I would dry it with a towel over it just to make sure it's real slow and even drying. There are loads of different ways that you can make a yarn bowl. This is just one of them as thrown on the wheel. You could make a slab bowl. I have videos on how to do slabs and make a slab bowl, a pinch bowl, all sorts of different ways. A drape bowl. So find a method that works for you and explore and try to use your creativity and do your own thing. Good luck.